Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Film and Family. If you are ready to take your film career to the next level without sacrificing a healthy and satisfying personal life, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in.
Today we're talking about feelings as fuel, or allowing our feelings to become fuel for various things, I suppose, but our art, our films, our ways of expression, pretty much all forms of communication, which is something you talked about in an email recently, this idea of communication. So,
do you believe that feelings are fuel for our action? Is that something that you believe personally?
So referring back to the model, which we talked about an episode or two ago, that would be congruent with the model. Do I believe that? Yes, for the most part. I think that, especially when we're running on default, that's true. I think that sometimes we can intentionally make it happen as well. I think that willpower sometimes feels like I'm using my conscious brain to do something that goes against what I'm feeling. Like I might feel like doing something, but I consciously choose to do what I'm not feeling like doing because of a conscious choice. So I don't think that feelings control us, but I do think that feelings, yeah, they fuel. Fuel is an interesting word. They fuel what we do. They can either fuel us to do something that we choose not to do, we don't end up doing it, or they can fuel us to do something that we are choosing to do. And when we're really feeling it, that, I say we say that, right? I was really feeling it. You could say that when you're doing anything, right? I was really feeling it that time.
I feel like that's sort of a state of flow when it's the action naturally is flowing out of the feelings I'm having. It's not forced. But even if it is forced, I think that's because of a feeling, maybe a feeling of commitment or grit or,
You'll certainly feel something when you use your willpower to do something. If I'm feeling really distracted and I really want to, eat candy and sit and talk with someone, but I know I should be doing something else. If I end up just getting up and pushing through that, I'm going to feel things. I don't know if but those feelings almost seem like they come after, or maybe they come after I get started, and then they can turn into fuel. You know what I mean?
So, I'm not sure I do.
So, I might feel like procrastinating. I might feel lazy or lazy, I could say. And if I get up and say, I'm just going to go run 10 miles because I have a goal to run 10 miles every day. Well, once I get my running clothes on and I start running, the lazy starts to turn into determined or energetic or depressed, because maybe it's really hard. I don't know. But I feel like they can convert to other things. And then eventually, let's say I start running and then I start to feel really good about myself and really motivated. That motivation can then all of a sudden become fuel for that thing that I am doing now. But it didn't originally fuel my getting out. Sometimes I don't feel motivated, but I do things anyway. And then you know what I mean?
Well, even what you just described, I think, is just you changing your thoughts, and that changes your feelings. So
you interrupt the model.
Yeah, you wake up feeling like, I don't really want to run, but then you have this thought of, I'm going to do it anyway because I have this goal and I'm going to stick to it. And then you feel that commitment and you get up and then you start running and you start to say, I feel good about myself that I got up and I'm doing this. And then you might feel motivated. Mm-hmm. So it's you're having new thoughts that are creating new feelings as you go.
Yeah, and I can feel something and I can change that. And you start to feel that self-respect and that self-confidence. So yeah, I think feelings are definitely fuel. But sometimes our feelings need fuel. Our thoughts can sometimes fuel our feelings, or I guess they source them.
Well, so to go back to the model, just as a reminder, in case you are joining us for the first time or are not super familiar with it yet, it basically says that first there's a circumstance and then we respond to it with a thought.
And that's subconsciously usually.
Yeah, we're not usually aware of it. And then that thought creates a feeling, which drives our action and creates the results we have currently in our life. So we're just kind of focusing in on feelings and how we can use them as fuel in a useful way.
Yeah. So do you want to jump into the Fred Rogers stuff?
So again, we love Fred Rogers. We immediately thought of a song that he sings pretty often called "What Do You Do with the Mad That You Feel?" And we thought we'd read those lyrics today and talk about it.
These lyrics were made pretty famous when Fred Rogers actually appeared before Congress during the Nixon era when they were going to defund public television programs and stuff. And I can't tell you the name of the representative. But anyway, these lyrics are what Fred Rogers chose to read. And it pretty much, after lots and lots of people talking before the hearing, these are the lyrics that kind of changed this representative's heart. And you can kind of see this big shift happening when he reads the lyrics and he realizes sort of the power and value of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and public television in general. And so,
luckily for us, it's all captured on video.
Oh, it's awesome. Look it up on YouTube. It's so
Or just watch the
awesome.
documentary.
Or you could watch Won't You Be My Neighbor, 2018 documentary on Fred Rogers. It's great. Okay, so let's read these lyrics and talk about feelings as fuel.
Are you sure you don't want to sing them?
Yes, I'm sure, but maybe we'll throw a link to the video, the YouTube video, in the description.
Cool.
Are we making that promise a lot? We're gonna throw it in the description. Do we ever do it?
I usually do the descriptions. And
someone email us if you want it. Email us unless we remember.
I'm sure
then you won't have to.
You can Google it.
Yeah, hopefully I can remember.
Just watch the documentary. It's great.
Yep. I'll send a link to the.
Okay. Well, do you want to
trailer.
like switch off reading a verse or so?
Okay.
Okay.
What do you do with the mad that you feel when you feel so mad you could bite? When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems very right?
What do you do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go?
It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song.
I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish. I can stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine.
Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a woman and a boy can be someday a man.
Okay.
Pretty remarkable stuff. It's certainly not as benign as the things I'm hearing most out of television. Children's programming these days. That's like, you could hear that anywhere. That's really cool stuff. But I think when we first heard this, maybe not when we first heard it, but at some point we started to talk about, anyway, Anna, you had some thoughts about, he mentions punching clay. He mentions like playing games, like this idea that you're like reconverting.
Yeah. And I especially liked where it says, see how fast you go. And I thought about him swimming, how he would swim and play the piano and kind of his own outlets. And then I thought about my own kids, and we had been given the idea from your sister that sometimes when her boys were rowdy, she'd have them run around the house. And
rowdy meaning horrible. I'm not talking about her boys. I'm talking about sometimes just kids in general when they get really, really like inconsolably angry or sad or just lashing out.
Well, and I saw my son get really angry, and I thought he really needs to put that somewhere. Like he's filling up with all this steam and all this fuel, and he's just like letting it out by hitting his sister or screaming at us or something. And I thought, how else could he let it out? And so I tried taking him out on a run. So sometimes I do this with him, and I'll just have him run as fast as he can until he kind of feels better and he lets that feeling fully go through his body and come out and just fuels it into something so that it's not stuck inside of him.
Or it might even just shift his brain until he starts feeling something else. That's interesting that we were talking about running earlier and now we're talking about running again.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because I think we can misunderstand this little verse where he says, I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, I can stop anytime. I think it's important to remember what he says here. it's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. So he mentions thinking thoughts, and he mentions doing something else instead. I think sometimes what we try and do is just stop doing something that we've planned is wrong, and just like sit there and be stopping. But you can't like be stopping. There's no such thing as like you can only like stay totally static in your life and in your brain for so long. I feel like I've done that sometimes where I'm like, okay, well now I'm going to focus really hard on not doing that thing. And our brains don't work that way. It's like you can't just sit there not doing something without fueling the desire to do it. It's like that resistance fuels desire.
Well,
but you can do something else instead. You can punch a bag or some clay. You can hit all the keys on the bottom of the piano. That's another Fred Rogers thing. Or you can write a script. Sometimes I've found that when I'm feeling really bad, it's really hard to sit down and write. And I kind of want to be in this nice, peaceful, neutral space where I can get really creative. But I'm starting to learn that sometimes when I'm feeling really bad, it's nice to have something that I'm working on that's really personal.
Yeah.
Something that's about a dad, or something that's about a husband, something that's about a relationship that I'm in. Sometimes that's maybe more literal than some of you will care to do. There's all kinds of writers out there. Paul Schrader, he wrote Taxi Driver, and he wrote a book called Transcendental Style in Film. He talks about the metaphor of trying to create sort of a fictional reality, whatever you want to make up. It doesn't have to be fantasy or sci-fi. It can be real life-ish, present day Earth. But it's a fictional reality. You've created a fictional character in a fictional circumstance. And then it's just metaphorical enough about basically you or some version of you that could exist, that the real you, the reality of it all, and the metaphor, this fictional reality, he compares to a positive and negative, where you want it, if it's touching, there's no spark. And if it's too far away from each other, if it's too separated, there's no spark. But he likes to get that metaphor just the right distance to where he can basically explore everything and say everything that he's done in his mind, but not done in reality, or say everything that's real, but without actually saying it, so that he's just not making an autobiography. Anyway, I'm just giving that as an example of an alternate way to pour your soul into it, pour all your feelings into it, whether it's a metaphor. Damien Chazelle, on the other hand, although I think he does do this pretty similarly to Schrader, he says, when I think of a screenplay idea, and I know, I'm paraphrasing, that my friends, like subconsciously, or I should say he probably thinks that his friends are going to say, oh, Damien, you just make movies that are like exactly what you've experienced. Like you just make movies that are like exactly your life. And he says, once I feel that fear, like, oh man, all my friends are going to like read this or watch this movie and go, oh man, like you just make movies about yourself. He's like, that's when I know I should probably make it. Cause then he knows it's so personal at that point that it's maybe a little scary. So anyway, I've experienced that recently where I'm sitting down to write and I'm like, ugh, I feel terrible. I'm like, well, I'll just write.
Yeah.
I'll just write that.
I think the beautiful thing that I realized eventually is that all emotions are fuel. It doesn't matter if it's the peaceful ones or the motivation ones. It can be anger. You could pour your anger into your work. Let it fuel what you're doing, and it can do it in a positive way. You can run faster if you're angry. You can write things that are deeply personal and meaningful and connect to people who also sometimes feel that anger.
Or sorrow.
Or whatever it is.
Or even a want or a desire that you don't want to have. I think that is huge. I think that's something that we don't make movies about very much. Some of us do. There are filmmakers out there, storytellers, writers, painters, whatever. But I think it can be really, that's something I think that I feel personally like I want to make those kinds of films. So I want to jump into a thing, Anna, that you mentioned before we started. Is there ever a time that this is bad? Can I give an example of when I think it would be bad to use your feelings as fuel?
Sure.
I think it's when you're manipulating your life around the feelings. It's that thing that Stephen King said, that art is a support system for life and not the other way around. This idea that you can kind of vet your art and almost like rip your art to pieces and use it as sort of this thing that you can just support your life with. You're not supposed to rip your life to pieces and support your art with it. And I heard this thing once. I think it was about like, I know who it was about. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to like call people out on the podcast, but he's a famous piano player. And like in a concert, he talked about like dating girls and trying to get into really serious relationships just so that he could break up and feel heartbroken and write about it, writing piano songs about it. He didn't even sing or like write lyrics. And not that there's anything wrong with playing the piano and not singing along. There's amazing pianists out there. I just think that that's the wrong way to do it, honestly, because there's a degree of falsity. Is that a word? There's a degree of falseness to that. And there's also just, that's dangerous. That makes artists extremely dangerous people in a very destructive way that's not good for anyone, including themselves. That's an opinion, but that's something I guess I want to say as a voice of caution in this episode.
Yeah, I guess I would say if you're giving time to a personal life, those feelings, the full spectrum of feelings is going to happen naturally.
Yeah.
You don't have to go out and seek it out because you're just giving time to live a life. And especially if you're spending some of that time with a family, I think meaningful relationships are going to naturally have a whole spectrum of emotions that come with them. And so I think the more common problem you're going to run into is resisting your emotions. And most people do resist their emotions a lot. And that's like, I like to think of an emotion as kind of knocking on my door. Like, oh, sadness is knocking on my door. And I choose whether I let it in or not, which if I answer, I'm acknowledging the emotion in some way. I'm acknowledging that it's there. I'm accepting it and letting it come in and tell me what it needs to tell me, because it's just information, right? It's just your body telling you some information. That's all. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or that anything's not working or anything wrong with you. It's just information. And emotions are here to teach us something. So if we let them in, we can learn the lesson. If we don't, then what we resist persists. So they just keep banging on the door, banging down. And it's like the other example that you hear a lot, or that I hear a lot, is like holding a beach ball underwater. When you're trying to push it away, it's just going to push back with more force. And so these emotions that we're resisting are actually getting stronger and stronger and pushing at us even more.
Mm-hmm. And, I think we also do this with our kids. I've heard this metaphor said in different terms. Sometimes as parents, when our children start to throw a tantrum or cry or express some sort of really negative emotion in a way that's, I don't know, too loud or inconvenient, parents will say, stop crying, stop.
We're teaching them to resist.
Yeah, resist, stop, hold it all in.
And then it just grows.
Quit. And then, of course,
bigger.
What do? They go, and they scream louder, and they get more and more upset. And I heard it said once that children are passing through a tunnel, and if you tell them to stop, they basically just freeze up, but they actually can't get through it, and it actually makes it longer. It makes everything take longer and be bigger and worse. And what we actually need to do is allow our children and ourselves, because I think we're all in some ways children, to just pass through it and just say, okay, let me walk through this tunnel with you, and let's walk. Let's just walk forward and keep moving forward. And then when you acknowledge the emotion, you let them get through it, and we just go together, then you move through it. And I think you can do that with yourself. Your brain says, I'm feeling all these sad things, all these chemicals, all these emotions. And you just go, okay, let's walk through it. Let's let it in. Like you said, let it into the house, let it have its visit, and then it'll leave.
No emotion is dangerous. I think that's important to realize.
Thoughts can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But that's the tricky thing, is that thoughts are always going to be there unless you let the emotion in, because letting the emotion in allows you to trace it backwards to the thought.
You can't find the thought if you're resisting it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so if you resist the emotion, that's why it persists, because that thought's still there. And as long as you keep that emotion out, the thought's still there. It goes unaddressed. It never lets itself exist. And this is why I think you and I have found it to be revolutionary to practice this sort of frightening honesty in our marriage as we've like said, okay, I'm just going to say everything I'm feeling. And then we talk about all of our feelings and then we kind of talk them through until we find the thought that's the root of it. And then once the thought comes out into light, sometimes the thought, it's like almost silly. We just see it and we go, oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And
it seems so big and
it
scary.
seems so big.
And then you let it in and you're like, oh,
I can kind of see
are the
why
one
that's-
who's been like knocking my house down for years.
Yeah, you're just like putting holes in the roof like a bad tree. Anyway, I'm not speaking autobiographically at all. And then like other times the thought we finally find it and we're like, but it's true. And we're really stuck. And we say, no, it's a fact. And then we have to kind of poke holes in it and
Deflate
explore it, deflate it. And then, but just talking about it does that. Bringing it to light, talking about it, seeing it from all sides, and then going, oh, I don't have to believe that. That thing is causing me a lot of problems. And that's a thought that I thought was totally factual, totally real, totally, completely unthinkable.
Well, and Mr. Rogers was all about emotions and teaching children what to do with their emotions. And that's why he said, anything that's mentionable is manageable, and always encouraged kids to talk about their feelings. It's always a good thing to do. And there are many ways to communicate. As artists, we can talk about our feelings through our art. We're always using symbols to communicate, whether verbal or nonverbal. And so you can talk about your feelings in many ways. But I think it's also nice with children to help them, especially young children, or just children who are maybe young emotionally. Adults can be that way too, is to start to give them the words, give them the vocabulary, be kind of a mirror. So you can say, oh, it seems like you're feeling sad because you're crying, like tears are coming down your face and you don't look well. I don't know.
You look like a wreck.
You look a little sickly.
Well, and Anna, you started to do this thing. Did you come up with this? I feel like you did. Maybe you didn't.
Probably not.
You started doing this thing with the kids. We should get back into this. This was pretty effective. You'd sit down and you'd hold them. You'd talk to them, do what you just said and say, hey, I think you're feeling sad because of all these things that I can observe. Is that what you're feeling? Are you feeling sad? And then they might say yes or no. I feel like sometimes they would just say no because they wanted to be contrary. But then you'd say, okay, what are you feeling? And they'd say, I'm feeling upset or whatever. Marshall will sometimes be like, oh, are you feeling mad? No, I'm feeling angry. Are you feeling angry? No, I'm feeling frustrated.
It's okay.
He'll
At
just
least he
rename
has
it.
3 words
Yeah,
that he can
that's pretty
go to
remarkable.
the one that's most applicable.
Or he just says it because he wants to say the word. He doesn't want me to say it. But then you would say, what color is it? What color is the sad? Oh, it's red.
Where is it in your
body? Yeah. It's
Is
in my
it
hands.
fast or slow? Is
And you
it
give them
friendly
options.
or
Is it in
a
your hands?
stranger?
Is it in your tummy? Is it in your nose? Is it in your head? Is it in your feet? And sometimes they'd say all sorts of funny things, but then is it familiar or stranger? Is it just random questions like what color is it? Is it fast or slow? Is it
hot or
hard or
cold?
soft? Hot or cold?
Is it loud or quiet? Just, kind of opposite adjectives. But basically what I'm getting them to do is lean into the emotion and
Accept
not
it.
resist it and accept it.
Allow it.
And you're right. Sometimes we do teach our kids to resist their emotions because they want to, mostly I think it's because their emotions are loud and sometimes we just want to quiet that down. I feel like there's always a baby sleeping in our house or a
Right.
guest we have like a guest room that we rent out. So we're always like, shh, quiet, which is sort of saying, don't feel this right now. And then especially Adeline, our little girl, she'll just like, you just see it fill up her whole body.
Oh yeah,
then it explodes.
the moment you tell her like be quiet, it's like bam, like it just explodes.
You
And
can see that
every
resistance,
time
like
it like
making
happens
it
for
grow.
like 3 seconds. She can resist for like 3 seconds, and then she just like becomes.
Oh,
it's like
it breaks
that
my heart. Like
moment
sometimes
in Lord of the Rings where like I can't remember who it is. Is it like Frodo is getting like dragged in by this octopus like thing in the first movie, and then all of a sudden they like shoot it with an arrow, and then like a gazillion tentacles just burst out of the water and start attacking everyone. I feel like that's what happens with Adeline when you're like resist. 3 seconds later, it's like it's like explosive.
it's so like It's so real.
Oh, I regret it every time. I'm like, I shouldn't
I
have
know.
said that.
I
Oh,
always
shoot.
feel so bad. But it's amazing to watch. I think kids are great to watch for just like default human behavior. We can learn so much about ourselves by watching what they do automatically.
We're all kids.
Yeah. We're just grown-up
and you've
kids.
done this with me before, and I get really mad when you do it. What are you feeling? I'm feeling angry. What color is it?
Where is it
I'm
in
not
your
doing
body?
that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing. It's turquoise. It's in my chest. It makes me want to punch my desk, and then I'm like, yeah, okay, I feel better. You've done that a couple times where I'm just like, I like resist that hard. Like, don't coach me right now. No, I cannot be helped. My problems are worse than everyone else's, and it's real. And then I feel better once I allow it. Allowing. This is not an easy thing to do, but that's what's so great about being filmmakers. We have this perfect way to allow our emotions. And that's why we can use those feelings as fuel by just kind of pointing them right at a film and just exploding on it. You don't have to leave all of it in the movie, but it at least lets you pour it into the script, pour it into the performance that you're acting, pour it into the, I don't know, whatever you do.
Well, and if you think about a literal fuel like gasoline, if you're just letting it explode out and splatter all over and spraying it wherever, it's like, then you just give yourself a bigger mess to clean up and it doesn't help anything. But if you can direct that fuel towards
an internal combustion engine,
a vehicle that's going to take you somewhere you want to go, then
it can be really powerful.
Yeah, it can be really useful to you. And so, but it doesn't matter what your fuel is. It doesn't matter what your emotions are. All are good fuel, and all of them can be redirected instead of towards that default action, which is usually like, you can feel an energy, especially when it's a strong emotion. There's an energy that your body gets from that emotion. I think especially with anger, it's easy to notice that like surge of adrenaline or the desire to move, to move your body and like hit something or kick or whatever. And you can take that powerful energy and just pour it into something you love, like a purpose that you have or whatever you're doing that's in front of you that matters to you. So even if I'm like, with the kids or doing dishes or whatever, I can just kind of like let it fuel the experience that I'm having. And
it can be hard to do sometimes for me. I think that sometimes life with the kids is so static that I have a hard time knowing how to fuel. The reason I think running works so well is that it's so easy to fuel a physical activity. Maybe this is a guy thing, but I just feel like maybe it is. Maybe that's why it's something my sister said she does with her boys. She has half boys, two, and
her girls
two girls.
Are older.
But yeah, so, but I think maybe, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily a gender specific thing. I'm thinking out loud, but I can fuel it into my art and I can fuel it into a physical activity. I don't know how to fuel it into my like homeschooling of my kids. I'm really angry.
I think it's a way to connect with people. When I'm fueling it into a relationship, it's like,
just talk to them about
I can
it.
understand you because I know you feel these things too. And, even right now, we're recording the podcast. I didn't really feel like recording the podcast. We were kind of like, I just want to relax. But then I think about you, listeners, and I think, there's people out there who are also feeling tired. They're feeling tired because they're resisting their emotions, and that is exhausting. And they're feeling tired because they're trying to balance film and family, and it's really not working out, or whatever, whatever your situation is. Maybe this will be helpful, and maybe this is a way that we can connect and relate to each other.
So I just thought of two ways I could fuel my relationship, my relationship with my kids, with my feelings. I think two ways. One, Mr. Rogers always poured his thoughts and feelings into make-believe, and he taught kids to do that. Every episode there was make-believe. And I think that even today I was thinking about this actually with the kids. I was like, I need to figure out ways to play games with them. Games, make believe, stories, but also some like maybe more rigid game structure things that have like rules like tag or hide and seek, or something you could make up with some sort of set of rules. And it just lets you kind of pour feelings and energy into something. The other way is just talking with them. I think if I'm feeling really down and not up to something, I think it might be good for me to get into the habit of just saying, Marshall, I just want to talk to you about these things that I'm feeling. Now, that can backfire because they're not always the best listeners.
Sometimes they say really amazing things.
And sometimes you can ask them questions about things as well.
And I just said, Marshall, I'm just feeling like really angry. Like I don't like my life right now. I forget what was going on. But I remember he said, well, you sometimes feel like that. And sometimes you feel like you love your life. And it's
sometimes hard to like reject things when they come out of their mouths. You're just like, yeah, you're right. Like if I'd have said that to you, you'd have been like, hardly ever. Like but when Marshall says it, you're like, it's right.
I mean, it is surprising sometimes the wisdom that they have. But also, I love what you said about play and make believe, because play is a child's work. Or what is it? Montessori says that. Something along those lines. I feel like
Fred Rogers says it too, that play is a child's work.
Yeah.
He says it, and he says that it's very important. And, I feel like that's what we're doing either way. That's what we're doing. Play, make believe. Isn't that our work as filmmakers? No matter who we are, that's our job. And so we should be the best parents. We should be the best at playing games and make believing and engaging with children and allowing emotions. I don't know how you could be a filmmaker until you master the skill of allowing your own emotions, because if you don't allow them, your work will never be honest. If you don't allow them, parenting is going to be super hard because you're constantly resisting emotions and you're teaching your children to do the same, which leads to this extremely volatile household, which ours is, emotionally volatile sometimes, but it's just good to be aware of. And I think, I think that just is really cool. Actually, I love how this applies so well to both parenting and filmmaking. Yeah. This principle.
Well, and I love the idea of pretending with kids and letting your emotions fuel the play, because that's what kids are doing, is they're working things out. And I've heard it, parenting books say, don't discourage any kind of like things that are happening in your child's play, because most likely if they're playing something that's sort of complicated for them, it's because they're trying to work that thing out. And so maybe they're playing like that their toy hits another toy or does something that you don't really like. But it's like, that's them trying to work out, when you hit, like it hurts, and then here's the consequences. And it's good to let them work through that and kind of process the things they're learning.
Sometimes it's good for us to observe those things, although it can be scary. I have a great teacher once in college who said that his son asked him if he could have a cookie. And he said, no, not right now. And then his son turned around and said, Jesus, Dad won't let me have a cookie. And he turns around and looks at his son and he says, is this like a prayer? He doesn't say it, but he's kind of wondering it. And then he says that his son starts to speak in like this response voice, but it sounds like a demon. And he goes, okay, then I'll kill him. And he's like, what's wrong with my child? Anyway, so I bring that up in terms of not being worried if your child plays things that are somewhat disturbing, because I'm sure this was a pretty sweet kid, but our kids have sometimes played things that I'm like, oh my gosh, that unicorn is killing everyone. And like, why is Adeline so obsessed with killing? Like for the last week, she's just been killing everyone in her games that she plays by herself.
And that's a great point, to notice those things and take those cues and maybe help them try to work it out, either by playing with them or just teaching them and taking that opportunity as they're trying to work that thing out to bring it into the family discussion. And something that counselors will do who work with children is let them draw. They'll often let them draw because they don't always know how to communicate their feelings with words. And sometimes we don't either. And sometimes we rely on words too much. So they let them draw, and they draw and they draw, and you can learn a lot. And there's like that documentary we watched.
Rewind.
rewind about this kid kind of revisiting sexual abuse that he experienced as a child. And he goes back and looks at the drawings that he did with his therapist. And it's all there. Like, that's how they figured out what was going on, that he was sort of secretly being abused by people who were close to the family, was because it came out in the drawings. He didn't know how to put it into words, but yeah, pretty interesting.
Well, so let's get really tolerant of our feelings, and let's let them into our art, let them into our parenting, let our children be really allowing of other people's emotions. That is huge. That has, I think, revolutionized our marriage, being allowing, just allowing, not being allowing. Anyway, allowing each other's feelings, allowing each other to talk about those things and like find them, and just listening. I think I'm going to try and do that this week. So
I think a really good question to ask yourself too, if you are going to try to process that feeling and figure out what's causing it, is to just ask yourself, I know it sounds simple, but like, first define it. Say, I'm feeling sad. Why am I feeling sad? And then ask yourself that question. And if you just talk about that and you just keep questioning it, why, that's where you'll find what that feeling came to teach you. Like, you'll find the thought behind it, the belief that's causing you pain, or that's causing you whatever emotion you're feeling. If even a good one, you can learn how to create it again.
And just understand yourself more deeply.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Mm-hmm. And please let us know if this helped, if this was a breakthrough. Frankly, just recording this podcast really helped me sort through some things and learn. So I'm glad I sat down and did it. And recording these always gives me a feeling of pride that sometimes even stepping into a podcast episode not feeling very great is a nice way to fuel a podcast episode.
Yeah.
So fuel that emotion into an activity. Thanks so much, you guys, for joining us.
Yeah, if you like what you're learning on the podcast, the best compliment you can give us is always a referral or a 5-star review. And if you want to take the tools you're learning here even deeper, the perfect way to do that is by joining the Film and Family program. The process I teach in this program is simple, proven, and has worked for thousands of people. I believe it will work for you, no matter what your goals are. And when you join, you're in for life. So pretty risk-free. You'll either get the results you want, or I'll give you your money back. And you can check that out at invisiblemansion.com or click the link in the show notes. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.